Hello, everyone. If you're watching this video, you are likely led here from the article that recently ran in the Bigfork Eagle newspaper. It led you to the county website, and on the website, you can see a number of documents that are draft version of our current report, as well as a couple exhibits. There's a lot of information there to weed through. We are hosting this meeting and recording this video as a in lieu of having a public meeting. We wanted to have a larger gathering to solicit public comment and be able to share the current status of the planning of the Bigfork Senior Center, but the commissioners and the planning team decided it was probably more appropriate, given the state of the COVID-19 pandemic, that we would do this by some other means. So appreciate you bearing with the county during these times, and still trying to be able to be transparent about the process and where we are today. My name is Shane Jacobs. I'm an architect and project manager with A&E Architects. I've been the kind of point person on the design side that's been leading this process with the county, working with the county. I wanted to give you a little bit of a history and then bring you up to speed with where we are today. There's a link on the website where you can reply with public comments, and then you can also work your way through the documents there and take your time to review those. But I'm going to give you kind of a high level, and hopefully it's a comprehensive presentation of where we've been and how we've gotten to where we are today. And we're still not quite done yet, so there's still a little bit of work to be done before we've released this preliminary architectural report. So a little history: the county released an RFQ in June of 2020. That request for qualifications went out to multiple architects, and then several architects, including A&E, responded. We were deemed the most qualified architect, won the project, entered into a contract with the county, and then kicked off some of the planning work. And then we've worked through a series of meetings with the planning committee that is made up of county representatives and Agency on Aging employees. And then Commissioner Pam Holmquist is also on that planning committee. So we worked mainly through that small group, had one meeting with the Bigfork Senior Center board, and we've kind of shaped this process that I'll kind of show you some exhibits and some pieces of that report. Basically, this report is a preliminary architectural report that is a requirement of a CDBG grant, Community Development Block grant, that is for planning. So this isn't, we haven't entered into the design portion of the project. It is just a planning portion. We're starting to kind of shape some of the parameters of the project and do a kind of an initial analysis and put together some initial costs and concepts, do some early studies, and then there's a second application process that this report is required to apply for yet another grant. That would be additional funding that would lead to the design and construction of the building. So we're a long ways away from construction documents and putting it out to bid. We're about a year and a half, 2 years away, and we planned for that in some of our cost analysis, our cost estimates. And but that's essentially where we are. We've worked through with the planning committee. A&E has led them through some initial exercises that went from a hopes and fears kind of conversation that was really, what are kind of the qualities that we're looking for in the building? What are some of the challenges with the existing building now? And then that led us into a program, which I'll share here. So there's a look at what the report looks like. So it's a 130-page report in its draft version, this December version, and then we'll be releasing a final likely next month. This document is what we call an architectural program, and it is basically breaking down what the existing square footage and all the collection of spaces in the current senior center look like, and that's in the gray column. And then we've actually looked at Columbia Falls as a really good example that if we can transplant that building in Bigfork, it would serve the community well. We've also taken a look at Whitefish because it has serves a similar size population from a kind of a city and community standpoint. It is a more busy building than Bigfork's current senior center. So we've played with some of those numbers and done an analysis that way to arrive at what a recommended program would be. These numbers are important because we basically do a proof of concept that leads to some of the diagrams, the conceptual diagrams that I'll share with you here in a moment. The square footage also has a direct impact on the cost model and how we arrive at total project cost. This building is sized to seat about 30 people at a time in the dining area. It would have a kind of a combined dining and community room, a warming kitchen that would be kind of the point for the meals coming from the central kitchen at the South Campus building in Kalispell, and then also kind of a satellite point for all of the Meals on Wheels to be distributed in the greater Bigfork area. There's a kind of a small storage and freezer space, an office for about 1 to 1.5 people. Sometimes there might be a second person in that space, but predominantly one. Some storage, of course, restrooms, and then there's some room for growth built into these plans. We've also built in a little space just for circulation. The kind of a difference between gross and net. This is a grossing factor that includes a miscellaneous circulation of vestibule mechanical spaces, an electrical room, the wall thicknesses themselves, kind of the difference between the net usable space and the gross area of the building to calculate out to about a 2,500 square foot building. And then the far right column is basically an early occupancy analysis that we use as architects for health, safety, and welfare purposes, just seeing how many people from a code standpoint would be allowed in the building. Not shown here, but shown in the various site diagrams. Really, the required parking by the county from the county planning and zoning wouldn't require many stalls. It would be about 6 to 8 parking spaces for a building of this size. But given that there's a big influx of people at lunchtime, we're shooting for a number more like 30 parking stalls. 30 parking stalls would be more ideal for that kind of population on site at once. Of course, there's some other things to consider with how do we get drop off with a shuttle or any kind of transit system. What does Meals on Wheels drop off and pickup look like? How do we circulate in and around the site? And of course, we've got a group where we're dealing with a demographic, designing these buildings for a demographic that we need to be really conscious of ADA concerns and make the building probably above and beyond on the accessible front, above and beyond the minimum code standard. So those are all things to consider that have gone into developing this document. And you can see that this has a direct impact on these diagrams, and then I'll walk through those and then into the cost models. So this first diagram is an existing, what the site looks like today. It's on Commerce Street in Bigfork, right across from the middle school. It basically has a dirt parking lot. It's about 0.6 acres, the entire site. About half of it, maybe a little bit, right around half of it is pretty steeply sloped, and there's actually a little bit of a slope down in the front yard down to Commerce as well. It was about, the original building was a 1950s house, and it was donated to the county, kind of lightly converted and then added on to at one point. Because it largely still looks like a residence, it's not very efficient as it currently operates. There was actually another preliminary architectural report completed, so same process as we're doing today, but completed in 2015, and it looked at all of the Valley's senior centers from Whitefish, Columbia Falls, Kalispell, and Bigfork. Bigfork's was in the worst shape, and then by the time the grant was awarded, it really was determined that there was a budget shortfall and there wasn't going to be enough money to cover all the things that needed to be done in Bigfork. So that grant was amended. The other three locations were, there were projects conducted at each of those places to bring up their inefficiencies and where their challenges lie. But Bigfork remained still on the needs list. Therefore, that's the reason why we brings us to today, why we're completing another preliminary architectural report and applying for another grant for Bigfork. So there's a lot of issues with this building, and a lot of it's just related to aging systems and antiquated systems and things that aren't up to ADA. And really, the space at the end of the day, we could get away with a smaller building that was just laid out more efficiently to serve the population that uses this building. And there is a little bit of a chicken and the egg of right now, the numbers using the building are somewhat low compared to the other communities around the valley. There is an element of design and consideration here to say, if we build it, hopefully they will come. Hopefully we can, this building can grow a little bit with the community and with, as the baby boomers enter retirement and hopefully start using facilities such as this. How do we design it for them and design it, build it in a way where it continues to serve the community well into the future? So that's kind of an overall of what the existing site looks like. Steeply graded up front, kind of flat in the middle. This is your buildable area. You're either parking on it or putting a building on it, and then a pretty steeply vegetated site to the north. And site circulation is a little odd, and obviously the parking stalls aren't striped and don't meet any kind of ADA standard currently. So there's also some lead present within the existing building, and we have not yet done any kind of additional hazardous material report for asbestos containing materials, but given the era of the construction, it's probably likely, but that report has not been conducted yet. So I'll move to option one here, which is we keep this site and we redevelop it. We take down the current building that's there. We build a newer, more efficient, more simply kind of compact and laid out building. Try to build on those flatter grades, and then redevelop the parking both along the shoulder of Commerce, which will have some challenges because the driveways will still be as steep as they are today. But you can see that we've demolished the detached garage and just reused the existing retaining wall that's out there to maximize the parking layout, which ends up achieving 26 stalls, including 4 ADA and then 8 more on-street parking. So that 26 falls a little bit short of the goal of 30, but really this is a balance of you got competing things between the building and the parking lot that are competing for the flat ground, the most buildable ground on site. You can see that the building is kind of nudged up against some of the setbacks. There's not a whole lot of room for future growth. There is a little bit of room for a future patio, which can step beyond the setbacks. Really, the benefit of the site is you own it already as the county. They own it, and they don't need to acquire another piece of property. The location has also been, it's been expressed that the location is really desirable for the existing operation of the senior center. And that's one of the big benefits and draws of this site. But you can see that you got to pack a lot in given those existing grades. There's some limitations on what can be done. Option two, or excuse me, then we took an alternate of that option. We're calling option one alternate. And it basically takes a look at what if we really tried to achieve that 30 stalls, what would it take? And we basically in this scheme simplified some of the parking, but we've had to do that by means of removing the existing retaining wall and coming in with a new retaining wall, which isn't an easy task. It's actually a large ticket item, and it's a series of process. It's kind of a kind of a somewhat difficult process for contractors to have to put in temporary shoring, excavate that soil away, put in a new retaining wall, and then backfill in order to have more flat ground than we do currently to be able to afford 4 rows of parking. You can see that's angled parking, which helps on both the dimension across the width of this parking lot, but also demands one-way parking or one-way traffic through the site, which naturally creates a drop-off zone for a shuttle or Meals on Wheels, and then it's kind of a two-way in and out on the site. The building floor plan largely stays the same. There could be some room for future expansion between the north wall of that building and the retaining wall in the future. So it has the same pros and cons as the previous scheme, except for we've got some increased parking, a little bit of room to expand, but comes with a greater cost for replacing that retaining wall to create more flat ground for parking and future expansion of the building. Option 2 takes a look at replacing the senior center at the current Lake Hills Park over on O'Brien Terrace. The thought here is, and you can see it in the cost model, that you would be actually replacing the building on a piece of property that's already owned by the county. This would give the county the luxury to sell the current piece of property if they wanted, and then they don't need to pay to acquire a new piece of property. So you're building on a piece of property already owned by the county. It's basically a neighborhood park that doesn't have much by way of amenities aside from just open space and good sledding hills, it looks like. I think there's a little community garden near here. This suggests that maybe if there's the beginnings of some development on site, maybe there would be more to come. This building, this lot really lends itself to future expansion of not only the building, but future expansion of the parking, which might make some sense given maybe some other things happen at this park in the future, whether it's playground equipment or a pavilion and becomes more of a destination or a gathering space. If it increases in popularity, it's really easy to expand this parking lot as well. Really the biggest thing anybody would be dealing with there are grades, just the existing grades. There's a little bit of slope to the site. And really those are the kind of the pros and cons to this one. You already own it. It's kind of flexible in future growth. But with all of these options, we're always looking at what's the proximity to the area served? Are there other amenities nearby? How easy is it to get to? What is the thought if somebody was traveling up from Woods Bay or down the Swan to use a facility like this? And then what is the impact on the neighbors as well? What does that look like for all users and people that interface with the building? So that's option 2. Option 3 is on Jewel Basin Court. Actually, this is the only diagram just because of scale. This diagram is turned, but north is to the left on this one. Basically using the same building layout, so it's a very similar concept here. And again, these aren't entirely designed what it looks like in 3 dimensions, and all of the building systems is yet to be determined, but we basically laid it out to prove that concept that 2,500 square feet could be done, and we could build a little efficient, economical building and achieve the things that we're trying to achieve for this group. And then always kind of making room for the patio, looking to have kind of a street presence and a connection with the community from the senior center. So you'll see that as a common theme through each of these schemes. This is a concept on this lot at Jewel Basin Court is actually under contract now. So given our active real estate market, it's difficult to kind of chase new greenfield sites like this one that have utilities right to the curb, ready to go, ready to develop and building and parking. So there are challenges, as everybody's seeing, that's trying to purchase property, developed or undeveloped right now, that the county as a potential buyer would be no different trying to acquire property. So that's one of the challenges of this one. Of course, that also comes with a cost, and you're paying for that in that more volatile seller's market. So think of this one as not particularly on this lot in Jewel Basin Court, but this would be a greenfield development somewhere else, and probably on the north end of Bigfork seems to be where a few lots are kind of coming and going and coming up for sale, and some of the development is happening. So in this case, as opposed to the previous two, you would be acquiring a new piece of property, and in this one, you would also have the opportunity as the county to sell the current senior center property and building. So potentially an offset of costs there. And then all of these, as we'll see in the cost model in a little bit, kind of take you through some different ideas and try to project what some of those offsite costs are going to be as well. That one in particular has some lower offsite costs because the utilities are right there. So option 4 was the recommended option in the last PAR. And really, this building has seen 5 more years of age in use and deferred maintenance since that time. It really needs a roof, and it's becoming less and less likely that this is an ideal option just because of the money it would take to be invested in this building to take care of some of the ADA issues and the building system issues. So to only be largely left with the same floor plan and some of the inefficiencies that don't work for the plan today. You still have the location, you don't get any increased parking. The building is still oversized but inefficient, and that would be this option. So we wanted to dust off that old option from 2015, put it back on the table and say, what has changed since then, and what does that cost look like, and how does it compare to some of the other options that we're looking at today? So there are 2 more options beyond this, beyond option 4, but right now the market isn't, it's been a little bit of a challenge to analyze the other 2 options. They would be, I'll probably jump to those in the cost model. It would be a good time to talk about it. This is option 5 in the cost model. So there's no diagram that goes with this one yet. And there might not be. This one is, what if the senior center became a tenant to an existing building owner, and they found a space in town that was just move-in ready. And so this could be any building in the greater Bigfork area that seems suitable for the needs, and really it needs a gathering space. An office would be nice. A warming kitchen is a need, and then has to have some kind of parking to support the people that are using the facility. So if there is a building in the community that kind of suits all of those needs and it's move-in ready and they can just move their stuff over there and start occupying, there really isn't a construction project to be had. And so construction budget here is 0. And then when it comes to soft costs, there's not much either. It would just be potential sale of the current parcel at Commerce. And then accounting for rent, and we're assuming some rental figures there. So this option comes out on the upside that we could pay several years of rent with the proceeds from selling the current piece of property. Of course, we just need to find that tenant space that's move-in ready. There isn't any kind of formal lease agreement currently with any community member. So still looking for one, is why a diagram doesn't exist for this one yet. Moving on to option 6. This one is, what if we, same kind of scenario, but what if we found a tenant space that did need a little bit of work, and we did a kind of a light remodel and a $60 per square foot to a more expensive kind of medium remodel at $140 a square foot. We've taken the average of that and developed some construction costs. There are some soft costs for permits and architectural and engineering fees. And we don't know right now if there would be any hazardous materials in those buildings. So we've tried to account for all of the things that a project like that would, without having a specific site yet, but trying to account for the things that the project would require, and end up developing a cost of a little over $250,000 for such a project. That would be the investment by the county. And then if I jump back to the other end of the scale on these where we started with the diagrams, that option 1 of staying on the existing site and redeveloping it, scraping the existing building, putting a new building up, and kind of snugging it over to the setbacks on the west side of the property and getting a larger parking lot and gaining some of those efficiencies on the current site. This is where we're currently projecting what that would look like from a cost picture. There's a lot of thought that goes into this, and quite frankly, it's crystal ball work, but it's based on a number of things that are looking at some detailed cost estimates, so estimating some very specific things. Really, there's no great way to do this other than by a dollar per square foot at this point in the game, and really just starting to break it down into pieces that that we can start to quantify and look into our historic database and say, what have we historically done this type of thing for? We're also trying to account for a concept that's called the economy of scale. Basically, when you have a small building, which this would be considered a small commercial building at 2,500 square feet, compared to a larger project, your dollars for that kind of initial windup of the general conditions of the contractor and just mobilizing folks, you'd have those same costs, whether it be a small project or a large project. And on a large project, you can spread those dollars across all of the square footage of that larger project. So on a smaller project, it actually, without changing quality, it actually increases $1 per square foot. So some of these numbers might look high to some people that want to comb through this detail, but really we feel like we've adjusted for that factor and our active market currently. And then you can see the breakdown on costs that we've just tried to make this an all-inclusive total project cost. So there's nothing that we aren't tracking here. So we're not having a scenario where we've put an estimate together and it's construction cost only, and we've neglected to include project expenses, or we don't have something like building demolition. This is a public project, so it has Montana gross receipts tax in there, contractor overhead and profit, construction contingencies. We've tried to plan for all of those things, and then some of the project expenses below are formulaic and some of it are lump sums. The building permit and architectural and engineering fees have always adjusted for what that construction cost is, and trying to accurately reflect what those fees would look like in this market. And then some of these will have, DEQ costs and permits, and some of them are more and some of them are less, and they're very site specific. We also have utility connection fees for Flathead Electric and Northwestern Energy, and those are very site specific as well, just for their costs and engineering and installation on their side. We've got a breakdown for basic services plus additional services. In this case, those additional design services would be civil engineering and landscape design, IT and audiovisual design. We have an allowance in there for a site survey and a geotechnical report, and doing some of the hazardous materials reports, bid documents, and construction testing. Building commissioning is zero on all of these. It would be a requirement of the energy code for a larger building, but it not required on a building of this size with these types of mechanical systems. We put in an allowance for furniture, fixtures, and equipment based on $1 per square foot cost. And then these vary kind of option to option on whether there's land acquisition, whether there's a land sale, whether there's any rental costs, and then making sure we're including another contingency. We at the bottom. So this contingency up above, this construction contingency, I would consider more of a design contingency, that it would be something, it would be a scope that's not seen right now. It would be a little padding for scope that's not seen right now with where we are in a preliminary design standpoint, that we would want to, that we would realize during the design process and would ultimately wind up in the contractor's scope of work and their contract amount. This contingency down here is more of an owner's contingency for dealing with other rainy days that we would see on remodels or tricky sites, or dealing with existing conditions. And and those really 10% is a good starting point at this point in the game. If you don't develop a project budget with a contingency, you're just setting yourself up for failure or having to reduce the scope of work when you're putting some of those unknowns on site. It's always money to the owner, so if there's some left over at the end of the day, you're either doing more or putting it back into whatever fund it came out of. In this case, I will come back to, in this option, I will come back to line T for that. There are some rental costs that I've accounted for in this cost model, and that is for, since we're knocking down the building and replacing it, there's going to be a period of time where the senior center group is without a building, and that they will have to move in somewhere. They will have some other accommodation somewhere else for a period of time. So I've tried to account for that during that time during construction. So basically those project soft costs get added into the construction costs for a subtotal there. Because we're building this this cost model at the end of 2020 and we're trying to project in the spring of 2022. So there's a period of time in the spring of 21 where we will be applying for the grant. Then middle of 21, we'll be hearing about the grant, and then we can launch into the actual design of the project in the end of 21 with hopefully getting it out to bid in spring of 2022. So we're trying to project today's dollars into future dollars. And as many of you know, it's been a volatile building market out there as well, not just the real estate market, but the cost of materials are sometimes changing daily. So this is another important item, and you can see 6.5% trying to account for about 2 years, and it might be 2 volatile years, amounts to $85,000 of real money. And so if we don't have a line item for it, it really sets us up for failure in the future, and some hard conversations about not doing what we said we were going to do. So that's a little bit of the philosophy to building this type of document with this type of detail when we're at a not very detailed stage of design. Option 1 alternate is largely the same. You'll see that retaining wall is a big ticket item. It's over $500,000 by our estimation at this point. You can see that some of the other numbers adjust down the line here in the project expenses to reflect that. So if option 1 is a almost $4 million option, option 2 is a almost $2.3 million option. So it really starts to drive that cost probably out of what is a feasible range. Option 2 is about a 1.3 option. And you can see some of the interesting things that happen in here with when you own the property and can sell the property, but in this case, when you already own the Lake Hills property and can sell the property at Commerce, and in this case, some of the difference is made up with some of the off-site costs, that there's some utilities that need to be extended to that site, and that's really where we don't make up as much ground in this option as we thought we might. Still one of the more affordable options, but it didn't quite capture all the things that we thought we were going to do by building on an existing piece of property or a property that was already owned by the county and then being able to sell the current parcel. Option 3, you can see that it ratchets it up to about that 1.4 range again. And this is, you're essentially offsetting costs between purchasing a new property and then selling the existing property. Of course, you don't have the building demolition in this option. You don't have as high of offsite costs in this option either. And then option 4 is is back to that option that was the original PAR had suggested, and it amounts to basically have taken the construction dollars from back in that PAR that were developed for late 2016, projected in them to today, and then it developed project expenses to match those, subtotaled it again, and then took dollars from today and then projected them into the future, just into spring of 2022, just as I have the other options. So this price tag looks like a pretty appealing option compared to some of the others. You just have to remember that you're still left with a building that has a lot of challenges and isn't very efficient or effective in housing the program that occupies it. So with that is the long and the short of where we are in this process. Looking forward, we're going to send this out to review and hear what CDBG has to say about this draft document from December 2020. The county will be reviewing it, Agency on Aging in particular, and then we'll be continuing to take your comment and appreciate the group being able to not meet in person, but use this as a format by way of the Bigfork Eagle leading you to the county's website and being able to watch this video and look through these documents. And hopefully everybody sees that as a transparent and safe process to receive public comment and have some influence on a project like this that we see having making a big impact in Bigfork well into the future and serving the population. And we all hope to age in place and live in this wonderful place and be able to use a facility like this in the future. So I thank everybody for your time and look forward to seeing your comments. Thank you.